Welcome to Occult of Personality, esoteric podcast extraordinaire at occultofpersonality.net. I'm your host, Greg Kaminsky, and your co-host is Rudolf Berger. This is episode number 189, featuring 3 separate interviews with first visionary artist Manny C. Price, and then author, musician, and more Derek Hunter, and third is activist, author, and Tai Chi teacher Ethan Indigo Smith. Occult of Personality podcast is made possible by you, the listeners, and by the subscribers to chamberofreflection.com, our membership site, as well as all those who support us via Patreon. This episode is also generously sponsored by Grove Argentum, a grove of the goddess in New York City and a member of the Fellowship of Isis. I want to let you know about an upcoming event. If you're in or near the Chicago area, I'll be presenting on May 9th and 10th of 2018 at Libertyville Masonic Temple on the subjects of David Chaim Smith's Deep Principles of Kabbalistic Alchemy, and also on the syncretic angelology of Renaissance philosopher Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. I encourage you to attend if you're able and get your tickets in advance. The link to Eventbrite with a summary of the presentations, location, and link to purchase tickets is in the show notes. Hope to see you there. On May 1st, 1776, Adam Weishaupt founded the Order of the Bavarian Illuminati. Weishaupt's goal for the order was to elevate society with the virtues of public education, the ideals of the Enlightenment, and the general liberty of humanity. In short, Weishaupt sought to illuminate the world. Now, over 240 years later, and for the first time in history, the collected works of Adam Weishaupt are being professionally translated into the English language and published in a 24-volume set produced by Malta Minerval Editions. To celebrate the 242nd anniversary of the Order's founding, we are pleased to announce Volume 1, Number 1 of the collected works of Adam Weishaupt will be available for pre-sale at maltaminervaleditions.com beginning in May 2018. To learn more, visit them on Facebook and Twitter at username Malta Minerval or at maltaminervaleditions.com. Anathema Publishing Limited. Quality occult books and contemporary esoterica. Established in 2011, Anathema Publishing aims to provide superior literature in content and form by creating a trinosophic relationship in troth and gabo between publisher, author, and reader. Anathema Publishing produces refined books for the true bibliophile on topics ranging from Gnosticism, traditional craft, alchemy, Hermeticism, witchcraft, to Luciferian theosophy. www.anathemapublishing.com. Temple of Thelema is a true outer order of the greater mysteries, providing ceremonial initiation, structured training, and regular group work, all in conformity with the principles of the Book of the Law. An investment of time, effort, and commitment is expected from each member. Each is expected to aspire fervently to the great work, to dare, with courage undaunted, to perfect that work, and ever to apply his or her best effort to effect harmony within the order and within the world in general. Founded in service to the AA, College of Thelema seeks to guide the student to an understanding of the law of Thelema. Most especially, this means a deeper understanding of oneself and of one's true will. A combination of instruction techniques is employed, including seminars, written texts, and individual work. For over 40 years, College of Thelema has published journals in the Continuum and Black Pearl, as well as several books on occult subjects maintaining high standards in Thelemic education. Visit Temple of Thelema at www.thelema.org. A Cult of Personality podcast is also sponsored by Miskatonic Books, an online store that focuses on the esoteric, occult, ceremonial magic, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, witchcraft, the Golden Dawn, as well as dark fantasy, classic horror, and supernatural fiction. They carry books by all your favorite esoteric publishers as well. Just visit miskatonicbooks.com. Now, first up is an interview with visionary artist Manny C. Price, also known as Manny the Uncanny. That's M-A-N-I. You can find her online at mannytheuncanny.com. Again, that's M-A-N-I, theuncanny.com. We begin by talking about the Kickstarter for Manny's project, The Unnameable, an H-P-Lovecraft short animated film that sounds phenomenal. Find the link to support her work in the show notes. And we also delve into Manny's work with spirit as she shares some of her extensive experience and natural gifts in this fascinating interview. Manny Price, I want to welcome you to A Cult of Personality podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me being here.
So you're also known as Manny the Uncanny, and you are a visionary artist, and your work is pretty extraordinary for anyone who hasn't seen it. Obviously, they should check it out. Your website is mannytheuncanny.com. And maybe you could probably better describe your work than I could for the listeners.
Sure. Since we are doing I should mention that we're doing a Kickstarter, and it's launching on April 19th. I am now doing an animated film based on the memoir of Frank Belnapius Long memoir, The Dark Side. So that's something that I'm also a filmmaker. I'm an animator. And that's something that I'm going back into right now. That's my new phase right now. But my work predominantly has been the occult and the erotic. And if you want, I can go delve into more about that.
Well, sure. I think that would be great. But before we do, maybe you could tell us a bit more about the Kickstarter project, because that sounds pretty fascinating.
Sure. Like I mentioned, it's launching on April 19th, and it's based on the memoir, and the animated film is a traditionally animated feature that is going to be 5 minutes long, and it's going to be about the conversation between Frank Long and his best friend, H.P. Lovecraft, and they're having a discussion about the supernatural. And this was something that really sparked my interest in a way that most people, when they hear, obviously, the they think of the mystique of Lovecraft and the people that surround him. And this is going to be more of a take on, yes, we're talking about the supernatural. Yes, we're talking about the macabre and the ethereal. But this is focusing on two people having a very human and very intimate conversation as friends together. And that was something that I want to, through the medium of animation versus, let's say, live action, have this be the focus. That I don't know, I just wanted to bring them back to life. And so we're having it like a film noir feel to it.
Oh, nice.
So the backgrounds are being done by an artist friend of mine, Justin Wolfson. His work is phenomenal. And if you go on to the Instagram right now, which is instagram.com/theunnameable you can see that we have already a lot of the artwork and teasers set up for people to take a look at right now.
Nice.
That's fascinating, Manny. Also referring to your website that Greg was just mentioning, you are calling yourself, or you're saying about yourself that you're focusing on exploring the female side of many of the symbolistic and magical and occult arts, let's put it that way. So can you say a bit more about that, how you would define that for yourself?
I'm obviously very influenced by the decadence and the symbolist movement, and most of the artists, like the turn of the century, going into like the 20s and 30s. Lovecraft being one of them. On the shorter end of it, so like Oscar Wilde, and it's the thing that I kind of pull from that I wanted to focus on was the surrealist aspect of it, and kind of like using the symbols of, the archetypes that we know already, like in mythology, like whether it be Juno or Jupiter, and kind of bring that about within my working, especially when I'm doing specific workings with clients. And that's going into like spirit boxes and astral natal portraitures. And if a client is sitting down next to me doing, I wouldn't say a boudoir painting, but more like this is like a true portrait of them. This is me, of course, looking at their natal chart and everything, that I kind of sit down with the client, get a feel of them, the spirits that are around them, who's in their spiritual court, and show basically like a reflection to mirror them and tell them like this is like to manifest things from their life to bring about what they're exactly looking for when they come to me for that. So this is all the stuff that I'm kind of bringing to the table and putting into the work. And I know we can kind of go here and there and everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary to be able to see it with the vision of that, and then reflect it to someone in such a way that is able to transform the way they see themselves is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
When I look at your work, a lot of it has a really strong aesthetic feel, like it's like a visceral, evokes like a lot of feelings, emotions, very strong aesthetic sense to it. And I'm curious how your maybe family background, your exposure to religion, and your cultural background and where you grew up, how it all affected your work.
Well, I'm a New York City-based artist. I am both Puerto Rican and Irish-Scottish. My father was Irish-Scottish, my mom PR. And I grew up Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother kind of gently to me and my siblings explained our religion, which was Lukumi, Santeria, that, this is where you came from, this is who you are, this is our family spirits. And she taught me tarot in this kind of similar vein, that not to jump ahead. But when it came to my family spirits and my family spirituality, the way that my mother put it towards me, she was like, we do not discuss this outside the family. This is something just for us. Other people won't understand. So don't go saying this in school. And she treated it was a very private matter. This was not something that you went and talked to everybody about. So this is very interesting for her to see me do this kind of work for people, because it's always been very secretive, and it's always been like, word of mouth and people coming to us and, helping them. Mm-hmm. I was taught in my family that Yamaya was my spiritual mother, and that she watches over our household. So that was our main saint in our family, especially when you come to see the Bovada and, the way we set up our altars, that when you first come into the door, like, you're going to see her predominantly. And then when you're in the front of the house, you're going to see St. Anthony. So even though we were very open, we were very quiet about it. And she didn't treat it as like, how do I say that? It wasn't in your face. She didn't want us to scare. She didn't want to scare her children. And when we were, as she calls it, and my grandmother calls it, developing, seeing spirits, hearing spirits, talking to them, seeing them, and even feeling them or smelling them, we thought it was pretty normal. When we did ask questions, they were very gentle about it, saying, "Oh, you're developing, La Nena. Everything's fine. Go back to playing." And that was how, it was kind of treated in the household. My father, who was coming from a Protestant Roman Catholic side, it didn't seem to bother him. He just let my mom do whatever. And he just thought, your mother just has a different way of praying to the saints. And he didn't suspect anything.
That's interesting. But Manny, that triggers a question in me, which I think it's a bit a tricky one, but you might be a good person to have a very clear opinion on that, given your background from two very different sides. We sometimes hear that in the occult work and also in the arts, you can only really live a tradition or use a tradition, let's put it that way, if you have a personal background rooted in that tradition. And there are others who think, no, you can also, within the occult traditions, choose the ones that fit to you, even if you don't have that ethnic or traditional background. What's your take on that?
The funny answer for that, for me, would be both. Why do I say that? It's ultimately not my decision, your decision, or anyone's decision. It is ultimately Spirit's decision if they want to work with you. You may have worked with a spirit in a previous life. They might have worked with your ancestors, and that's why they choose to work with you. If they are even part of your lineage or your ancestry, they will work with you as well. Or even, if ancestors will just work with you, that's it. If it comes to Lukumi, it's similar. It depends on those, some will call them outsiders. And I've heard, look, I've even experienced prejudice within the religion, and it goes both ways. And I understand why, because they're very secretive, they're very protective, and it's an oral tradition. It's a very beautiful religion, and I can understand the wanting to protect it, and the fear of people scamming. And look what happened in the during the spiritualist movement at its height. Houdini came in, and he went to court because there was so many frauds, and we now have laws because of him. It's something that it's ultimately up to Spirit. That's my opinion on the matter. And again, it's only just an opinion because that's my experience working with Spirit. Because I have those who are from a totally different background, from, let's say, a very Nordic or Celtic background, and they may have one or two African spirit next to them because maybe they were married into it. They have their children who are from that lineage, or that spirit decided to work with them for a specific task. But it's ultimately up to Spirit, because you cannot force Spirit to do, That's the other thing. I call it spiritual Pokemon, that they seem to like want to catch them all. And that is the wrong way to go about it. When it comes to spirit, you should stick to 3 tops. That's the main workers that you're working with, like your protector, your oracle, and I wouldn't say your healer. And that's one of the things that they teach us when we're starting to be initiated into the religion, that they talk about, who's your guide, who is the healer spirit, who, helps to give you prescriptions or help people in the readings. Like, this is what you need. You need a baño, you need a floor wash, you need this, that, and the other, or you need to have a rogation or whatever. And they will communicate that through you. So you have like different helper spirits that are next to you. And so on and so forth. So that's my opinion on the matter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very, very interesting point of view.
Interesting is right. Manny, it's one of the things I find fascinating is you are, how would I say it? You the way you come across speaking about this is so much more self-assured and experienced and confident about it than a lot of people I speak with on these matters, which is not to say that they're not those things as well, but certainly don't convey it in the same sense. So the feeling that I get listening to you talk about it is you're far more well-versed in this than many people. And one of the things I'm curious about is if you are able to sort of, if you pick up impressions or messages from spirit or what have you, only when you are open to it, or does it happen at other times as well when you may be unexpecting?
There are so many ways to go about that. First and foremost, again, it's up to spirit if they want to talk to you. They talk to me and my family because we are family. It's like talking to, your son or your daughter, going, if you go in that door, you're doing something, that's not good for you. Like, for example, and they will speak up when they need to, or they feel that it's very important. It's not all the time. It's only when it's crucial. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're sitting down doing something for a client or someone that's coming in, or family members or whatever, and they I wouldn't say whisper in your ear, but they kind of like give you a heads up. What else should I say on that? As to all the time, no, because again, I know this to be definitely true. Spirit goes on vacation. I know that's not discussed. No one wants to admit it. And that's why I don't understand how readers can be always on all the time. And I can understand if they're just reading the symbols, but if to have spirit next to you, there's a way to go about it, and you have to call them, and they will let you know if they're next to you. And you have to be humble and upfront and say, listen, I don't think we could do this today. I'm not feeling anything or whatever. Let's reschedule. Because if you are not 110%, you're going to get sick, by the way, because you're going to leave yourself open. There's so many things involved, getting yourself prepared, whether it's doing reading, seance, lamessa, whatever, So there's a process. And it involves a lot of energy too. And because spirit also, they have to use energy. They're using the water that you're using. It's not just for scrying. That water is for them to speak. When you put the glass there, when you put the candle there, that is for them, for elevation, for not for yourself, but for them. And that's energy. That's for them. Just to give an example. It's in the myths where, Odysseus is going to, the island, and he has to make sacrifice, and he has to make a pit and cut the throats of all the ewes and the cattle, because that blood is used as the energy. That is the payment. That is the sacrifice. That is what the spirits are going to talk forth, because that is life. Of course, in our modern day civilization, we don't do that. So this is the closest we can, because we live in this time and era. But yes, spirit does go on vacation. They come when they want to, and I shouldn't say it like that, but it is true that they go dormant. And if you're working with a particular, they go vacation. That's the best way to explain it or call it. They will take a break with you. They need a break. You need a break. And, or it's not their turn. It's another spirit's turn to talk with you and work with you. So it's like a rotation and a cycle that I've seen as well. Because growing up, I noticed that when I was going to college, all of a sudden everything went quiet. And that was because I saw that from high school to college, yes, you're developing, yes, you could hear them and feel things or whatever, but because you're focused on academics or you're focused on certain things that, life kind of comes up and crops up, they go quiet. So I can understand that because I hear it a lot, that time frame, like they disappear and then all of a sudden they come back with a vengeance. And the 30s are like the major ones as far as I know. I'm feeling it. My late 20s going into my 30s. Now that I'm going to be 35, they've been very talkative. Now it's kind of petering off because I just had, that was the other thing. At least for my family, when it comes to pregnancy, they definitely go quiet. They, how do I put this? The experience that I felt when, it's going to be it's probably going to be TMI, but when I had the first two, and it was miscarriages, there was nothing. I didn't know that. But you go through a cleaning process. Spirit doesn't bother you because they consider you dirty, filthy. You have to go through a cleansing process, and it's understandable. So for the birth of the pregnancy of my son, that process, it was very interesting because I was still able to work, whereas before I was not. So I was able to do readings and do cleansing and such, and I was surprised by that, which I don't recommend, by the way. It was just interesting that that had happened that way. Yeah, so that's my experience on it.
Thank you for sharing.
Mani, artists in general who are not relating like you do to spirits for their inspiration, they would also describe the situation a bit in a similar way that some days the inspiration, they would probably call it, is not there. And some of them then have certain techniques to be able to create anyway, but maybe not as on a high level as they would wish to, but they are still able to create. Can you translate that feeling also into the way you get inspired by spirits?
There's a good example that I just recently had. About a month ago, I had a dream with, I assume it was my mentor spirit. But that's the other thing. Spirits will take on the form of friends, family, and people you know, because it could mean that they're a spirit in that person's court that you need to talk to, that there's some situation, or that is the symbology, or that's how they get your attention. So, or not, they come in gently that way. So this way, not to scare you, or because they need to get a message across. So they're not going to scare you being like the Archangel Michael. He might come in as something else entirely, like your best friend, your mother, or whatever. Just to give an example. In this case, this mentor spirit had come to me as a friend of mine. And I was very surprised by that. And it started basically that I was working on this project, which I am, and he started talking to me, and I said, "What are you reading?" And he says, "I'm reading on architecture." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And he's like, "No, you wouldn't be interested in it." And I said, "Try me." And he took my hand, and this was in my mother's basement as I'm dreaming this. And you know how dreams are weird, that they open up into other worlds. So he opened the basement door, and it opened into this field. And the field ended up into a forest, and we're walking towards it, into this forest. And I started, I even said this to Aaron Litch, because the next thing that I saw was like a mountainous cathedral, and it was just spire after spire, windows. I wouldn't call it stained glass. It looked like a different material altogether. And one of the windows I saw, I want to say it was St. Michael because of the way the position of the statue was. It was made out of marble, but where the wing should have been, it wasn't wings, it was like ribbons of light. And instead of having a spear or a sword in his hand, killing, or subduing the devil, he was standing on top of a spear that looked like the earth, and he was like a huge beam of like a lightning bolt of light descending down onto the earth, which I thought was very interesting symbology being shown to me. And this was looking down from the ground upwards. And I went, this is amazing. This is beautiful. What is this? And I said, where are we? Oh, what is this place? And he says, the beings or entities that are allowing us to be here are not here right now. We are allowed to see this. And so this way, I haven't drawn this yet. But they wanted you to see this for yourself, so this you could draw this at a later time. So please remember as much as you can as we're here. And I'm walking into this space, and it opens up into like this altar, and I'm seeing all these I don't know if there's arcane symbols, but like these symbols I have not seen before ever, like tapestries and long red flags coming down on either end, and it looked like that it still was maintained, even though it looked like it was abandoned, whoever that or whatever had lived there or is living there. And that was the dream. So that's to give you an idea of like how spirit comes to me. That's one example.
Yeah, great.
That's
Thank you.
Beautiful. One aspect of what your work is about is helping people, I guess you put it as loving themselves. And I'm just curious if you had any thoughts for people listening in regards to that, because it does seem like in the world at this time there is a tremendous issue in that
where can
regard.
I begin on that? I myself, and anybody who says otherwise, they're selling you a snake oil bill of goods and everything. Everyone struggles with, how they feel about themselves, self-loathing, self-hate, and et cetera. I could go ad nauseum, especially women with, the way that the male gaze portrays, the gender and, what's expected of us. And it gets to be a very heavy burden. And especially during this political upheaval, especially with the whole Weinstein thing and, every other thing that you're being bombarded in the news, you're like up to hear it, especially as a woman. My only advice to women is take every day, little by little, treat yourself as much as you can. It's so hard, I know. But the work that at least I do with my clients is that I show them what I see in them. And that's where we start off with. And I go with their comfort level. So if there's something specific that they want from me to do, let's say if it is a boudoir painting, let's call it that. And I would say, okay, what are you comfortable with? Can you look yourself in the mirror? Can you say, I love you to yourself? Can you say that I'm a sexy woman? Can you say I'm a strong woman? And we start from there. And if they're comfortable just showing their shoulders, that's fine as well. If they're comfortable being naked because this is something that they need to do, that's fine as well. And I show them what I see as an artist. And when they see what I see, like me being their mirror, they are always flabbergasted and shocked, and it's very empowering for them. And I asked them, what would you like to see in the next 5 months or, in a year or so, happening in your life? Well, I like to meet a guy. I like to have, children or this, that. And I would add that to the painting of like what exactly it is that they're looking for, whether it be a symbol or an actual painting of it. For example, I did for this mother, because she was very proud of her daughter. She just finished law school, and she says, I want to do this as a gift for my daughter. I said, okay, what do you envision for your daughter? What are you thinking? And we went through sketches. I showed her proofs. She saw the drafts. She made it very clear what she was happy with, what she was not happy with. At the very end, she was, of course, madly in love with the painting. Finally, the day came to give it to her daughter for graduation. Daughter loved it. I'm hearing months later that the daughter not only got the job, but the room that she is in, that she's working at, looks exactly like what I painted. That was the thing that freaked me out. And she showed me the website and the video and everything. I was like, nice. What? Okay, that scares me. So that was interesting for me. I'm like, okay. And that was not the only case that ever happened to me. I've had one other client tell me privately, did you speak to such and such, and did they give you these information or this photograph or whatever? I said, no, this is totally something that came out of my mind. What are you talking about? She went, wow, because you got, it looks like exactly like the photo that I thought this person gave to you. And I was a little concerned about confidentiality. And I was like, oh no, this was totally based on your personality, based on what the client had told me, because this was, I think, a Christmas gift or something like that. So this is not the first time this has happened.
It's awesome.
Mali, to wrap it up, you told us about your project that you're actually working at the very beginning of this podcast. But is there any other project upcoming after that you already would like to talk to our listeners about, or anything that you would like to point out about your work and your
one other thing that
projects?
we're actually offering as a reward for people who are going to be contributing to or supporting the Kickstarter. I have another project coming out. It's called Orphany, and this is the first issue. It's finished. It's done. I'm just waiting for it to go to print, and we're going to do a book signing in Brooklyn. It's going to be at Anyone Comics, and it's going to be in June. So far we got the date set for June 6th. It's not set in stone yet. But we're very happy. We're very excited that we're going to print, and we're going to also be at New York Comic Con to promote it as well. So I'm really excited about that. That comic, just to give a little blip about it, what it's about. As you can see, my dreams are pretty vivid. So this is actually based on the many dreams that I have, and I think people are going to be in for quite an emotional and a visual roller coaster. I'm hearing very good reviews about it thus far. People reading it and looking at the first 16 pages of it. So I can't give too much of it away, but just to summarize what it's about. It is about this girl that she is on like a spiritual quest to find Psyche's box and retrieve it from the god Hypnos, because it's her birthright, and her mentor spirit is not all that he cracks up to be, and she has to fight a few obstacles, including the fact that he has a death curse that she has to lift off. That's a cliffhanger now. Good.
Yeah, that's a good one. Look forward to that. That sounds great.
Let me see if I can give, I think it's orphany .tumblr.com. So if anybody is interested in it, I also put it on Instagram, which is through Instagram.com/Manny the Uncanny, and that's MANI the Uncanny. I know most people get tripped up because they think it's MANNY, and it's not.
Manny, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad you asked us to redo it, because I feel like the result was clearly superior.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Really, thank you so much. Next, we have the one and only Derek Hunter, an author, musician, and practitioner of tarot divination, who's developed his own philosophy and way of living called Love Chaos, and described in his 2014 book of the same name. His newest titles include Life and Black Light, White Dark. You can find Derek Hunter online at www.chaosriddler.com. Derek Hunter, I want to welcome you to a Cult of Personality podcast, and thank you for joining Rudolph, myself, and all the listeners here today. It's really a pleasure to speak with you.
The pleasure is mine as well. It's an honor to be on your show, and I greatly appreciate being here with you guys.
Nice to talk to you, Derek.
Yeah.
Nice to talk with both of you.
Now, normally I like to start by asking people about themselves, but I just want to cut right to something here that you are pretty is important to you and is very interesting to me reading about it, and that's Love Chaos. Can you talk about Love Chaos? What is it? How did you come to these ways of living? And just tell us more about this religion and philosophy.
Yeah, sure. It's something that, for most of my life, the idea of chaos, of uncertainty has been has always been a recurring experience for me. I grew up as a child, not actually calling either my biological father or my stepfather, who I grew up with, father or dad. I called them by their first name. And I grew up with this uncertainty, not really sure who I should consider to be my father, and I was kind of in the middle between the two of them and my mother as well. And I just kind of always sort of, life seemed to be very uncertain and unpredictable about what may happen. And so it's something that, like an early play of mine, I started writing in my, like around 12, 13. And an early play of mine was actually called Chaos. And it's something that's always kind of appealed to me, the nature of chaos. And throughout my life, I wasn't raised with religion. I wasn't really raised with any kind of traditional belief system. And my father, my biological father, was a very much a believer in being agnostic and basically embracing doubt. And that is something that I found myself embracing as well, in embracing doubt, embracing being agnostic. And I went through different phases of my life and was always searching for some kind of truth, somehow like the deepest truth that I could find. And I went through different phases. I was a Christian for a year and a half, 2 years. I was a political peace activist for a while. I was into Satanism for a while, Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, and different things. I was into existentialism. I just always sort of like tried to find different ways of living and believing in philosophies that appealed to me. And then getting into the occult, into Aleister Crowley, and to Austin Osman Spare. And, there's just a lot of different things I've explored. And I kind of came to the point where there's so many different people who came before me who I appreciated and who I loved their lives and how they saw things. But I just sort of felt like there needed to be an expression for this philosophy, which I've been basically feeling my whole life, was that basically life is chaotic. And in that context of chaos, it was important to focus on love, and love for other people and love for myself. And that basically, that's the origin of like, I'm just going to go ahead and start this thing and do it myself and live it on my own terms, and share it with other people. And it kind of, a lot of this philosophy of love chaos is found in my work, in my writing, in my music that I do as well, and in my practices with tarot readings and the practice of magic. And it also, too, in the work that I do as a counselor and I help guys who are coming out of prison and who are inmates, but we actually call them students at the facility that I work at. And I help these gentlemen who have lived extremely chaotic lives. Some of them have killed people. In fact, a lot of them have. And I try to help them to reintegrate into society. And so what informs my work in that area as well is my own philosophy of love chaos, of living in this chaotic universe that we find ourselves in, but focusing as much as we can on love.
That sounds
thank you.
Really great.
Yeah, there's certain elegance to it.
Yeah. Derek, you just mentioned tarot, and also when one visits your website or biography, tarot seems to be quite an important part of your day-to-day work and life. Could you say a bit more about the relation between love chaos and tarot divination as you see it?
Yes, definitely. I going back to my father, he used to do my tarot reading at least once a year. And he did it in the style of the Celtic cross and the traditional style of tarot reading. It was even years before I got into the occult, he would do my tarot reading, and it was a very important part of my growing up. And so there's a personal connection. And one of the things that he felt was important to do when doing tarot readings was to see the cards as psychological tools, so that whatever one can find that would be helpful in each of the cards, it would be helpful to that person psychologically and wherever they're at in their life, whether it would be a relationship that they have with their partner, family member, or with work, or their ambitions, or whatever it may be. First and foremost, there was kind of seen as psychological tools. So whether or not, they were really real entities or beings or represented something from another world was not necessarily important. What was important was how can these cards be used to help the person psychologically. So that was one of the main things for me, which I continue to use when I do readings for myself or for other people. The other thing which I created was a different way of doing the tarot readings, and where basically I provide two different paths for the person. And these two different paths are like options. They can go this path or they can go the other path. And that is really important for me because I'm more about possibilities. I'm more about alternatives and using these two different paths as a way to think about the person's life in a way where they're considering, like, life doesn't have to be one way. It can go either way. So that's for me. I really feel like Aleister Crowley's deck is probably my favorite deck out of all. So I always use the Thoth deck and feel like it has a lot of truths to it. And it is a deck that has a lot of power and it's extremely dense deck. And of course now I'm studying the Solobosca Tarot, which, the Game of Saturn was an amazing book on. And what's interesting to me is how the Solobosca Tarot seemingly has no relation to the Kabbalah whatsoever. And that is interesting, because so much of what we know from Crowley and others really seem to focus on that issue. But yeah, for me, the tarot is extremely important. And I created a music album on it where each of the, based on the Thoth deck, the 22 trump cards, I made electronic music adaptations of each of the cards in the deck, and I find musical expressions of it. And that experience of creating that album based on the tarot was a very interesting experience because I found, new layers of it by experimenting with sounds that got me into different states of consciousness by the use of the deck. So for me, the tarot has a power to it, which is amazing, and I will continue to use the tarot for the rest of my life.
Yeah, thank you.
Derek, I think you're a tremendously creative person. From music to visual arts to writing. And I really would like you to tell listeners about the works of fiction you write. And if you could also, in doing so, talk about your writing style, because I think that's also unique.
Sure. Yeah. The thing about my writing was that what I call is a writing style called chaos riddle prose, and the idea behind chaos riddle prose is that it views life as one big riddle, and within that one big riddle there's an infinite number of individual and distinct riddles, and but unlike the traditional riddle, there's a question put forth and then one has to solve it. And this writing style, a lot of times the prose is written in such a way that it's kind of an enigma, but it's still like an enigma that is pointing to deeper truths. A lot of of the key influences on me go back to when I was a teen and first discovering the writings of James Joyce and Arthur Rimbaud. Those are two writers in particular that have continued to stay with me in importance. Their style is a way of penetrating the subconscious and deeper levels of who we are and of the world that we live in a way where you couldn't really do it in a naturalistic prose style. There's a lot of writers that I love who write in naturalistic prose, with very straightforward prose, but I felt like in order to get to a deeper truth of expression, it was important to find different and new ways to express yourself. It's basically very similar in the way that if you look back in the 19th century, the going from the Impressionists to the Expressionists, which is, you could look at Van Gogh as being sort of the bridge between Impressionism and Expressionism, where you see the artists are no longer concerned with just depicting photographic reality. They're concerned at portraying a deeper level of truth about existence, which you can't just get from appearances alone. And then at this time, and it continues forth with great artists like Picasso as well. And so the visual arts, I think, are more known for experimentation of form to get to deeper levels of expression. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the written word, well, it is known, like you have artists, people like Arthur Rimbaud or, André Breton and the Surrealists, who were very much about penetrating the subconscious and dream states, or the Dada, movement as well, and Jarry, and there's different writers for sure that you can point to Mallarmé, or you can say that, hey, there's people who are really trying to explore form to get to something deeper. But I think for the most part, most people would say it's true that the visual arts are more considered that way. And, William Burroughs even talked about that later on in the middle part of the 20th century, that it was really, for the most part, the visual arts were more ahead of the written word in that regard. So I'm definitely very much influenced by all of these different writers and visual artists too. And I felt like it was important because reality is, again, going back to Love Chaos, is really unpredictable. And as we are going into the 21st century, we're finding that just a lot of unpredictability experiences are happening, from politics to religion to cultural norms to sexuality to gender. You're finding so many different things which were considered norms before, which are no longer norms. And as technology continues to advance at a faster and faster rate, our lives are becoming more and more unpredictable. So I felt like it was important in a way with the writing style that I have with my works of fiction to basically reflect the nature of reality. And I feel like that was important to make it important for as the reader, you're reading these stories, and hopefully as you're trying to navigate your way through the stories and enjoy the stories, and they are meant to be entertaining, it helps to, in some ways, transfer consciousness, so make people more aware of that unpredictable nature of existence. So there's, it's an act of expression. There's certainly an aesthetic appeal to it that appeals to me, but there's a purpose behind it too, which I think serves, however chaotic, some ethical purpose behind it as well.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. That makes me ask you my next question, because all that you're saying, be it the love, chaos, religion, or philosophy, how you approach for example, what you said about where you work with the ex-inmates, etc., and also what you were just saying about your books and about aesthetics, about content, makes me think, how does this very holistic approach influence your day-to-day life? Or if you don't want to talk about that, how would it, in your point of view, how should it influence people's lives when they follow your thoughts and your aesthetic and your philosophy?
Certainly, that was actually a question that I asked myself, and when I created Love Chaos, was like, I didn't want to create some kind of philosophy which was something that I couldn't live on a day-to-day basis myself personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was important for me to understand that, like, to live it and to breathe this philosophy. And I definitely am one who appreciates the realm of the intellect and of and theories, and I definitely appreciate abstract concepts. But I'm also very much into living a philosophy, living an existence, and in a way where it's not disconnected from my ideas, or I want to be able to live my life in such a way where I can navigate the chaotic nature of it with this philosophy of love chaos. And so in many ways, like I do tarot readings, I do magical practices, but like in terms of ceremonial magic, that's something I kind of keep to a limited number of times, which I do every year, because I really feel like existence, my day-to-day living, and being conscious of my behaviors and my relationships to people is almost in and of itself a ritual. When you see the people in front of you, the relationships one has with them in I don't want to say a sacred way, because then that kind of just brings in kind of a whole other level to it, which again, being agnostic, I try to stay away from being too overtly spiritual, I guess. But basically, in importance, this comes back to my existential background is really, trying to live my life as if, today could be my last day on this planet. Trying to get as much as I can out of living. It was really brought to my just full on. It went back in 2005 when my son was born. He was born 3 months after my grandmother died, and I watched her die in front of me. And then 3 months later, my son was born. And then 3 months later after that, my father, who was my best friend, died, just completely out of the blue, of a brain aneurysm. And in 6 months, I saw the beginning and end of life, and with the people that I really probably, cared about the most. And it just forced me to kind of see just how life was that's just the way life is, it just can just snap your fingers and it's gone. Mm-hmm. And then, so it was important for me to just feel like what I was doing was important. And so in that way, that is how I live Love Chaos in that sense, and help. And I really feel like I've a lot of worth and value in helping other people. So it may seem odd, because when one reads my fiction, it doesn't seem overtly preachy. It doesn't seem overtly. I really try to stay away from trying to push a message on people. Most of my favorite writers were very much avoiding that as well, and I don't like to do that. But for sure, there is like a purpose to the work that my writing, my books do have a purpose to them. And in terms for people who would want to live a life of love chaos, It's something that I have done with other people who could have a very different background. My girlfriend, for example, she's a Christian, and she has lived her life with love chaos, but while still holding on to her Christian beliefs. My feeling is that for love chaos, it is something that people can do with different philosophies as well. It's not something that has to be exclusive. It can be inclusive. So my plan is that eventually, I'm currently working on a trilogy of books, and it is it's very important to me, and has a lot of what I've wanted to express throughout my life is going to be in these 3 books in this trilogy. And but once this trilogy is done, my plan is to pursue love chaos in further detail, and with 3 steps in particular. The 3 steps are simply having love chaos as a guiding principle in your life, so that you live your life, the choices that you make, the decisions you have to make from situation to situation, is determined by accepting that life, the universe, is essentially chaotic in nature, and that it's important to live a life of love within that chaotic framework. Then the second step would be to use psychological tools to help oneself to be more aware of oneself, to aware of your own emotional, states, and to be able to find tools to help you deal with those things, to deal with those issues, psychological issues. And then only then by the time you get to the 3rd step will there be the magical practices involved. I really feel like it's important to do those first 2 steps first before going into the 3rd step, having that guiding principle of love chaos, and then working on yourself, doing self-work, growing, working on one's own insecurities, one's own demons, one might want to say, but in a psychological context first, before one gets into the magical realm.
Yeah. Very true and wise.
Yeah. Well, Derek Hunter, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today, and thank you again for sharing about yourself and your work.
It's been completely my pleasure. It's been an honor being on your show, and I really love your guys' show. It's an amazing show. So the honor is all mine being on here.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Third, we have an interview with activist, author, and Tai Chi teacher Ethan Indigo Smith. You can find him online at facebook.com/108zone. And the link to his Amazon.com page is in the show notes. We talk with Ethan about Tai Chi, the esoteric symbolism of the number 108, the duality of polarity, and more. All of these subjects are detailed in the books he's written. Ethan Indigo Smith, I want to welcome you to a Cult of Personality podcast, and thank you for joining Rudolph, myself, and all the listeners here today.
Peace on earth. I want to thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to speak with you and be involved.
Yeah,
how's everything?
Excellent. It's really glad to talk with you, and I'm thankful that you contacted us about your work. Why don't you give people just a little bit more background into how you came to your path and what it is that motivates you?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I like to separate myself from my parents, but I am very much the combination of my parents in a lot of manners. My mother was a nurse and my dad is a farmer. So I really approach my writing in hopes to kind of feed, in this case, consciousness rather than, with vegetables or so forth, and also heal. I feel like expansion of consciousness and healing, and with that strengthening of mind, body, spirit is my main focus. Whether my subjects that I've written about are very serious to satirical, but they all focus on raising consciousness.
Excellent, thank you.
Ethan, on the website talking about you, it presents you with the words activist, author, and Tai Chi teacher. And I'm curious in that link, which I personally like a lot, about esotericist and activist. How would you define that for yourself?
Well, I've written many different articles concerning activism in general and politics specifically and generally, and also because of Fukushima, I became very interested in nuclear experimentation and have kind of taken a feeling of personal responsibility in exposing the elements of this industry and really military industrial complex arm of, excuse me. So, and I've also participated in different protests of various sizes. So I like to think I'm more so an activist with the pen, because that happens to be where my strong podium is, I guess. But I've also, I like to be on the streets too, but I like to focus on exposing the pollution and the industrial pollution of the planet. And have taken a responsibility, I feel like, to expose the nuclear experimentation and how devastating it potentially is.
Ethan, one of the things I really enjoyed about your work is I find that you have some really interesting and I think original insights into things. For instance, I like the way you approach the whole number 108 and this sort of esoteric numerology, but you also offer people practical ways to sort of maybe rebalance or become more contemplative or meditative. And I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about your own journey into meditation practices, and then maybe share some of those with the listeners briefly, if that's possible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the 108 idea is really the best way to describe it is 108 is the most profound number, and at the same time, it's the most simple or simplest meditation instruction. And what I mean by that is that 108 correlates and relates to many different practices and principles, and really all of them can be summarized in really one way to look at 108 is that the individual, symbolized as one, connects with, or rather there's nothing in between, the infinite, the eight, symbolized by the eight. So 108, all these practices and principles in terms of 108 really kind of have this underlying code, if you will, that the individual connects with the universal or balances with universal energy. And I find that many meditations have this direct concept within them, if not overtly so. But one way, or really the simplest way, but that doesn't mean it's less effective than other ways, to describe meditation is be one with the breath and really often enough, practices will specifically point out to have the the spine vertical. So be one with the vertical flow of the breath, and that's symbolized by one, and allow zero thoughts to coalesce, and I think a lot of people are afraid or shrug off rather meditation because it's really hard for them to have zero thoughts. And that's not the point. It's more specifically to let the thoughts that come up inevitably not stick, not coalesce. And so the next point of instruction is to tap into the infinite, and these moments where one taps into the infinite are, I think, best described as really a not so well known term, Wu Wei, Chinese tradition, where one is most effective with the most minimal effort. And athletes of any particular practice, when you see them do something outstanding, it really has that Wu Wei quality, where they are so connected and so balanced with the elements that they perform outstanding phenomena effortlessly and with beauty.
Right. Would you compare that 108 meditation? It just came to my mind while you were talking about it, a bit with the IOA of old ritual magic, where you have also this oneness in the I and the O, which is the zero in what you were saying, and the A. Could that compare to the 108 meditation?
Well, that what comes to mind when you mention that is really another element of 108 I found is that it is a magical instruction, or an instruction for magic, if you will. And so the first thing one does is accept and put together everything as one. And the next step is to kind of stir it up, right? And this is really allegorically put forth in the stories that contain witches' brew, where they mix it all up. So acceptance, and then concentration, and then transmutation into the infinite. So that is what sort of comes to mind, which has this 108 kind of construct, and also activism itself, whether it's magical or direct. You really have to understand and accept what's going on before you transmute it. So that's what comes to mind. But I don't know if that works along with your idea there.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually pretty elegant.
Yeah.
And really, it's the 108 idea is really, you nailed it. It is elegant. It brings together a lot of esotericism and metaphysics in a really grounded manner, and also in a manner that kind of lends unity to humanity. In other words, that all traditions and divergent cultures share phenomena through this vibration that comes forth as 108. And further, also the other ideas, the matrix of four and the geometry of energy, also contain elements of this same vibration, whereas peoples recognize this quality.
Right. Yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about, you use this term matrix of four, and I think I might know what that is, but I'd really like to hear more about it.
It's begins with really any number of divergent cultural phenomenon, be it yin yang or om, or even the culture of the cross. Really, a mathematical rule is when two lines intersect, there are four corners. And it also, maybe even prior to that, as a vibration, it also is reflected in simple arithmetic. And really, the matrix of four is, the way I think of it, is a simple way of saying duality of polarity. Because it's not just four, it's more specifically duality of polarity. And if you look at all of mathematics based on simple arithmetic, there's the four forms, which are addition and subtraction in a polarity, and multiplication and division in a polarity, coming together for this duality of polarity. On more esoteric construct, I think Om really sums it up neatly, and it's, again, the oldest symbol on the planet. There is the four levels of Om, which are the wake state and sleep state, which is one polarity, and the deep awakening and deep dreaming, which is the other.
Right. Well, I don't always want to pick up on comparisons, but it just comes to my mind when I hear you speak. This duality of polarity, which I find a fascinating concept, it somehow also reminds me of how Franz Barton put his way of describing the four elements, which is very much also through that magnet polarity and duality within. Are you aware of that?
Not specifically, no, but I'm always blown away by how many people have come across the duality of polarity, but not necessarily called it that, or have come across variations of ideas and / scientific constructs that are reflective of the duality of polarity. And again, the yin-yang concept, which is, that symbol represents the Tao, which Taoists basically say it's kind of the thing beyond all other things that is the vibration that everything unfolds under, right? And the yin-yang has the main polarity rather, of the yang and the yin, and also have the more subtle polarity, the yin within the yang, the little dots, and the yang within the yin. So it constantly unfolds, and I find that it's a really useful tool in understanding everything from social news to really esoteric but grounded ideas.
Yeah.
Now, Ethan, you're a Tai Chi teacher, and I'm just wondering if you can share with us and the listeners a little bit about that tradition and what practicing it does on the different levels, like physical, psychological, spiritual.
Well, just because I have 108 on my mind while talking with you, 108 really transforms as depiction. Well, there's, in the long forms of Tai Chi, there are 108 movements, in many of them, not all of them. And 108 represents the three qualities of movement. One can move in a linear fashion, and one can move in a circular fashion and a spiraling manner, right? So 108, linear, circular, and spiral. And all of martial arts, and Tai Chi being a martial art, has these movements within the forms and the function. And then also there is, just like so many constructs of 108, I dare not say all, but just like so many constructs of 108, there is the unsaid, which in this case would be stillness. So in Tai Chi, there are really all kinds of practices to unfold these qualities of movement. And even though there are 108 movements in the long forms, the 108 is, I think, a manner to communicate the quality, not the quantity. In other words, the way to move from linear to circular to spiraling. There's some really simple movements in Tai Chi, and also there's some really simple principles, I think, that are really helpful for people in life. But the quality really in the body and mind really unfolds through practice. It's one of those things, like with other martial arts, there are belts and there are ways to confirm experience and so forth. With Tai Chi, there's no belts. It's kind of show and prove. Let's see how much you've been practicing. So it said it's not the form, it's the practitioner of, because it's about moving in that kind of manner, the 108 idea.
Great, yeah. As a unfortunately final question, I would like to ask you about the book that I think you published in 2014, which has been called, or is being called, The Complete Patriot's Guide to Oligarchical Collectivism. Could you tell us what oligarchical collectivism is, how you define it?
In 1984, Orwell's main character, Winston Smith, comes across a book in that fictional world. And it's said, he doesn't get to finish it, but it's said that it's the book that empowers individuals in that very much institutionalized world. And it's called the Guide to Oligarchical, the Theory and Practice to Oligarchical Collectivism. And Orwell nails the description of what is often labeled as fascism, as plutocracy or corporatocracy, and he calls it oligarchical collectivism, which is certainly a mouthful, but it nails the situation. And rather than getting into a definition, the best way to depict the idea of oligarchical collectivism is as the pyramid system, right? And so all these different chunks of the same pyramid system are in themselves an oligarchy, right? A system of the few over the many, normally as exploitive as the local elements will allow, or as steep in a pyramid manner as people will allow. And each chunk of oligarchy comes together in this oligarchical collectivism, which is sadly worldwide mostly, and it involves means of exploitation of the many for the few, essentially.
Yeah, thank you. It's very interesting, and I should have known about George Orwell. Sorry, but thank you for clearing us up.
No. Well, it's one of those things that's interesting because many different phrases and words are now common in the collective consciousness from Orwell's book, but the O word, oligarchy and oligarchical collectivism, are somewhat diminished.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not you, it's a collective construct, and I think a purposeful one. So the Complete Patriot's Guide to Oligarchical Collectivism that I wrote is kind of focused on engaging and empowering individuals over institutions. And I really take no side except for the side of the individual. And so I get blasted by the left and the right for being too far one and the other. So I think I maybe nailed it.
Seems to be a good sign.
Yeah, it's a happy medium, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, Ethan Indigo Smith, it's really been a pleasure and honor to speak with you today. I just wonder if you had any final thoughts for people listening.
Well, let's all try to, as we seek to change the world, first change ourselves. Focus on building our own consciousness, and that really elevates everything around us.
Well said.
Sounds good. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. My honor to speak with you guys. Thank you.
The intro music is Awakening by Paul Avgerinos, and the outro music is Companion of Three by Barry James. In the Chamber of Reflection, we've had a number of excellent member Q&As with past guests, including Craig Williams and Josephine McCarthy. Our next member Q&A with esoteric researcher David Metcalfe is up next, along with more original lectures and interviews, so stay tuned. And I'd like to remind you that although you're able to listen to this podcast at no charge, it costs time and money to create. We ask you to support our efforts and the creation of future podcasts by joining the membership section at chamberofreflection.com or subscribing via Patreon at patreon.com/occultofpersonality. And if you're already supporting the show or have done so in the past, my heartfelt thanks, and I salute you. Until next time.